I'm not nervous. Is that okay?
No, it's fine. Okay, so you just like pull this thing like a fist to your face.
Like
Yeah,
this.
perfect.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So Mark, let's just dive into it now. Why do you hate neural networks, Mark?
That's a good. Probably I hate everything that I don't understand.
Oh no, yeah, but that's a very general human thing. We didn't tend to, but like, well, sorry, I was joking, of course, but like, so like whenever I tell people like I'm working in like machine learning, it's like the entire machine learning sort of idea of machine learning has collapsed into the idea of deep learning.
Mm-hmm.
And what I tell people is sort of like, if you take the book by like the textbook that they use to teach AI, what's it called, a modern approach, artificial intelligence, a modern approach by those three guys, and I tell them to like go to the section of deep learning and see how many pages that is compared to the whole book. It's like 10, 20 pages.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, well, there's a whole lot more to it than this.
That's not proportional to the impact.
Yeah, impact, right?
Made.
That's crazy,
yeah.
right? That's also very interesting. Like the idea of sort of where impact like comes from. It's not like a small proportion of things contribute to do like a disproportionate amount of impact, like in any sort of human field. For example, this is something I got obsessed with some time ago. Like for example, like one property will have almost all of the reviews on Airbnb.
Yeah.
Like one player in the NBA accounts for almost all the points that I ever scored in the NBA.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah, I think the thing is, and that's with many concepts in AI and machine learning, is there are many beautiful concepts that are used in the wrong context. And like I work in a medical context.
Yeah.
Where we often don't have the luxury of having large sample sizes, etc.
Is that the main reason for not using neural networks and stuff? The sample size problem, like having
well, partly because we know that overfitting is a real issue. We know that generalizability is an issue. We also know that a particular issue with deep learning, which doesn't mean they can become useful concepts. I think in our setting as well, because basically how I see a deep learner is a very clever way of doing feature extraction and doing that in multiple layers, which makes a lot of sense. But it needs guidance, I think, for doing that. In a very reproducible way. So I think also the community is working on that a lot. So how can you give it a bit more guidance such that it produces networks that make sense and that actually are generalizable and can actually be used in other settings. And maybe, yes, at some point it will get there in terms of being really useful and competitive to classical statistical models, so to say.
So, okay, when you mean what do you mean by guidance?
Guidance, I mean, don't just feed it with a simple data set and let it do its job, but also tell it where to look for and what to look for, and tell it about structure in the data set. So are there some groups of features that are kind of intrinsically grouped?
Right.
Often the type of data that we see is what we call mixed complexity data. So we have, for example, data from 10,000 genes, so genomics data, and on top of that we have 5 extra covariates that are that say something about the health of the person.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just throw them in like that it's like a multimodal setting. It's just throw them in like that is not a clever thing. You really need to think, okay, these 5 traditional variables should not be put on the same haystack as these 10,000 genes. That's not a wise thing to do. And so somehow you need to tell maybe the architecture of the network to deal with that.
Right.
Whereas on the other hand, you should not discard that there are correlations between those variables, also cross from genes to the others. So you should not, at some point, they should come together again.
Right.
So I think that can help a lot. But partly also it's just possibly ignorance, or in some sense something you tend to work on things that you understand, and
right, like but what is about the guidance thing? It's not like neural networks are just blindly learning everything, all the structure on their own, right? Like some of the all the best step function improvements in neural networks have been when we somehow gave it some information about a structure that already exists, right? Like convolutional neural networks, like we specifically say like the neighboring pixels, there's some structure there between pixels.
No, definitely in imaging. They're was really aware. I think another thing is the number of tuning parameters, etc. I mean, what we know is that many of the simple statistical models for machine learning or tree models quite strongly depend on the tuning itself. And in deep learning, I have the feeling that this is still it's like a craftsmanship. It's not like it's not made objective often, and that makes it hard to kind of make it reproducible or to because it's really there's a part of it that is just what I said, craftsmanship, and not so much. Whereas these actual tunings, so how many layers do you use, and etc., how many nodes per layer, all those things. There should be more theory. There should be more kind of guidance on that, so that it's that I know how to use it.
Right. Yeah. Like this is like when I was thinking about what to do for my my master's thesis, I had this idea that like what if there was this pain that I had where every time I wanted to read a machine learning paper, I had to learn a whole new set of diagrams, a whole new set of like symbols because every weird machine learning or neural network paper is some new weird tweaked architecture, which like speaks to what you're talking about before about the artistry of building a neural network. Is like everyone comes up with their own structure and own thing. And what I wanted to do was how in electrical engineering you have a set of symbols. Everyone knows what a battery is. Everyone knows what an AND gate is. Everyone knows what a capacitor looks like. Like, why don't we have this for neural networks? And I realized that's extremely difficult because everyone can just the only thing they seem to have in common is backpropagation and gradient descent, and everything else is just like it just branches out into some weird complex thing. Yeah, it's quite weird. But
the other thing to some extent that annoys me about this in the field in that respect is that I feel there's a certain burden of proof, and in terms of when you want to show, I mean, please go for it. If you want to apply a fancy neural network and you want to show that that is worth the effort, the burden of proof is against the simpler models. So, and what I often see is that actually this has been reversed. So whenever I do a simple logistic regression or I do something super, super simple, and we do a lot of consultancy in the hospital as well, right? And so our co-authors send in the paper. Then the reviewers ask us to actually compare with a much more complex model, which is not interpretable at all, because just for the sake of it. And then I think, well, the burden of proof is reversed, right? It's the other way around, and which is, and then I get to see lots of papers where it's the other way around, and they don't compare at all with very simple statistical models or very simple.
That's interesting.
Which is strange. I think you should always show that you clearly outperform them, and clearly I also mean kind of significantly outperform them. Yeah. So not just like you have an AUC of 0.77 and then you have an AUC of 0.78. I mean, I've seen literally, Udesh, I've seen this, and this is really kind of reflecting the difference in communities to some extent. I've seen this happening So right now, there's some people who try to make how to say this automatic systems for predictions, medical predictions, using large language models to kind of help the doctors or the medical researchers to help them build a predictive model, which is fine. This is completely fine. And
do you mean the LLM suggests architectures for them, or?
Yeah, the LLM. No, it's more like the LLM. For one thing, it's super useful. The LLM helps them in doing the pre-processing of the data, which is usually a big issue, missing data, etc. And then they have something what they call auto ML, something like that. So basically, then you can once your data has been processed, pre-processed, etc., you have everything ready. You can kind of give it to an auto ML procedure that has a big bag of prediction functions, including deep learning, but also some others. And then we'll spit out in the end what it will do. It does all kinds of cross-validation, checking and in the end it will report the best model, the best predictive model, which is usually totally uninterpretable, but it may predict well. And what happens next? And the point is this: then they report, for example, the performance of that model. Let's say AUC is 0.78, and then I've literally seen this. Then they allow you to compare with simpler models. For example, a super simple logistic regression. Yeah. And suppose that super simple logistic regression gives you 0.77 instead of 0.78. Yeah. Then literally these, and that is the deterministic part of it. These modules will say, you should go for the first very complex model because it's better, right?
On what metric is it better?
Yeah, on what metric is it better? Is 0.1 on the 0.01, sorry. Yeah. On the AUC scale, is that relevant? Probably not. And please give us an idea of, is it significantly better, which there are all kinds of statistical tests for that, so that we can, because it's an investment, right? Basically, you say, well, I'm going to go for a super complex model, which nobody understands, but if I can show it's significantly better in terms of prediction, let's go for it, right? But if not, then maybe you should make another decision.
Yeah, that's
what this deterministic kind of thinking, which is very much in the minds of the not in everybody, but it's very much minds of the AI and machine learning people, because it's all about optimization, right? Right, yeah. The training is kind of deterministic. Yeah, they should let go of that in the later phase when you start validating, we start comparing, and that's sometimes lacking, if you ask me. I've seen also papers where like the fourth digit after the comma was better, and they say it's better. I say, well, this is nonsense. Nobody cares. Yeah, yeah. That's here you can see the clash of the communities to some extent, which is not so much about the actual algorithms or something, I would say. I think many statisticians also appreciate lots of super nice ideas in machine learning, including deep learning, which is conceptually super nice mathematical idea. But they have problems with the kind of deterministic mindset.
Right. So I mean, when you say deterministic, you mean the training data is what it is, and the model parameters will be what it is?
The performance is what it is.
Okay.
Of course, I have to say that, I think the community also starts to realize that this is a shortcoming and actually works a lot on this. So works a lot on kind of getting some randomness, uncertainty quantification into it. There's things like conformal prediction, other things. So they're actually working hard to, but then still not mainstream. Definitely not. So because it's the hard part.
Maybe
hard part. Uncertainty quantification is much more difficult than prediction itself.
Maybe we should say just a couple of things about what broadly separates these two sort of fields. From my understanding, everything started in like the 1800s with statistics, right? Yeah. It started with. Am I getting the century right? Anyway, with Gauss and linear regression and everything. Yeah. This is statistics was there before this term machine learning happened.
Definitely, yes. Yeah.
So what is that? At what point? Where is that? The separation in those two paths. What is the? I'm still not very clear.
I wrote a blog about that, so I can make some advertisement. Okay, it's been a while, but if you Google for it, you'll find it. Where I try to first, I try to classify the two communities to some extent. Yes. Even though I feel right now, and particularly youngsters are really open-minded, and they don't feel like they belong to one of the communities, which is really good. We should have many people that don't care whether they're a statistician or machine learner; they just do what's right, and I think that is the right way to go. So I'm a bit old-fashioned maybe in a way, but I do think I really like lots of ideas for machine learning. So I would also feel that I'm a little bit of that as well. But it's like I think there's some differences in terms of complexity. So I think typically statisticians start simple and only only increase the complexity of the model if they feel it's needed, whereas machine learners start complex and maybe try to explain later on, like literally.
What you just told me comes to me as quite a surprise that like people say, hey, pick the more complex one, because like for the past 5 years or so since I've been studying machine learning, every time I did something experiment, my professors would be like, okay, well, your baseline should be a linear regression or a logical regression. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And then if there's almost nothing compared to a linear regression, then like, what the hell am I doing with this? The huge parameterized GPU burning model. It doesn't make any sense, right?
I think machine learners think more from a nonlinear perspective whereas statistics is very much built around linear models, although we have plenty of generalizations of that as well, of course.
Yeah.
I think the big difference, I think first to kind of say the positive thing about machine learning, I think, is that they always think very well on how to implement things. Are things computable? So the computational side of things is always managed really, really well, which is not always the case in statistics. I think statisticians are more like, we think upfront on how we want to do our inference, how we want to do our testing, how we want to do uncertainty quantification. If they have a model for which they can't do that, they basically will quit. Right. So there's also different starting points there.
Yeah, so for machine learners, it's like, we build a model, if it does a really good prediction, and we take it as determinate, like we take that single point of prediction, like a deterministic, like there's no, like we don't look at the possible wiggliness of what the prediction is. It's like this model predicts this is a cat.
Yeah.
And as far as we care, it's a cat. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if under some other conditions it predicts a mouse. Like we're not interested.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, but yeah, I think it's interesting because most people, at least the people that I talk to, who are mostly students and like like young like people who are in their bachelor or master, this idea that there should be an uncertainty about the prediction output is quite new. Like honestly, the idea
depends a bit on the set. I mean, in a medical setting, that's my conviction. You have to have it. I mean, not knowing the uncertainty is basically knowing nothing, because you make very important predictions, like on people's health, etc. So not knowing it is kind of. But I can imagine, like if you work for Booking or if you work for Airbnb, you don't care. I mean, if the consequence of the decision or the consequence of the action that's being taken from the prediction is not so serious, then maybe you don't care. Then maybe you're more like on a whole, on the bulk, I want to do right. If you do the wrong recommendation, Netflix, nobody cares. Well, nobody cares if you do all the time wrong, but if your predictions are on average quite good, you will do quite often, you will do right, and people will accept that. But in a medical setting, this is unacceptable. You cannot say I only care if I do it right 70% of the time. No, you really have to kind of
like I don't know how either I was not paying attention in my classes, which is probably not true. I was paying attention, I think. Yeah. But the idea of calibration was completely new to me. Completely new to me until you told me to look for it. And I was like, wait, what the hell is calibration? Yeah. And then like, of course, if something says if something has two classes, positive and negative, and and the final prediction is a number that says, okay, positive 0.7, negative 0.3, and I just assumed, it's a probability, like it's fine. Yeah. But then, of course,
it may not be.
Yeah, of course, you have to check. If you take 100 of those, and it's an independent sample, if every single sample has a probability of 70, then over the whole thing, you should
Yeah.
have seven like 70 cases of positive,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But like the fact that that doesn't happen all the time at all I was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
the fact that like that output are just numbers, like it doesn't matter if you put it through a softmax, doesn't matter if you do anything. It's like it's
No,
just a
but
ranking.
if you care about the 70%, then you
Yes.
start thinking about calibration, and is it actually does 70% mean 70%?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
no, that's important.
So would you say the concern over uncertainty is a big separating point between like statisticians and
Yeah,
machine
although
learning?
what I'm saying now also all the time, fortunately the boundaries are disappearing
Yeah.
between the two communities. It got, maybe slowly, but they are. I think on a whole, it would be good if more of the data science educations would spend a bit more time on general statistics than they do now.
Have you seen this one? Oh, wait. Have you seen this meme? I'm just showing him this. It's like statistics, and then they put a frame around it.
Yeah.
and they call it arbitrary.
Yeah.
I love this. I always,
I
I always think about this.
Yeah,
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I think we statisticians are super jealous when it comes to the marketing part. We've been really bad, and I think this also creates a little bit of friction between the two communities. Is that if we see how much money goes to AI and machine learning, also in the medical field, the money that we never got. And if you look at the medical field, if you're honest about it, and I preach for my own community now, but if you honestly see what statistics has done for the medical field, all the clinical trials, randomization principles, that's immense. Everybody will actually recognize that. And yet, in terms of funding, very, very little funding always has gone to statistics, and still, that feels. It's partly just also that. It's not just, and it's also like people, you mentioned logistic regression, and now people say they do machine learning if they do logistic regression. Say, well, no, credits where credits are due. This is a statistical model. But it just sounds fancier if you call it machine learning.
I remember.
Yeah, that lasso was invented by a statistician.
I remember, like maybe like second year of my bachelor, I was trying to do like a summer internship. And I had a phone interview with a bank, and they were like, "So, can you tell me about like here's a problem, like what kind of machine learning models would you think would work well here?" And I was like, and the first thing I said was like, I said, I mean, you'd be shocked at how many problems can be solved with the linear regression. And it was just like silence on the phone. I was like, that didn't land well. Didn't land well, I guess, because they were expecting some kind of like fancy neural network stuff, and I was like, no, but like your data's like this, your data's like this, like if only have these kind of features, and we should try a linear regression, see what happens.
I do think there's some kind of tendency also in the in other applications. I don't know too much about other applications than medical ones, but from some colleagues and friends, I do hear that more and more often they start to use simpler models again. And nowadays there's kind of these hybrid models that somewhere halfway purely linear models and very complex.
Like I love GAMs.
GAMs,
the past week or so.
Simple tree models that you don't grow too deep, or something like that. Explainable boosting machine. I think also that's where the community should go.
Do you think there's like a tendency, because for example, if you fit a logistic GAM, right? And you can do it with splines. So basically, you have basically a linear regression, but each feature gets a nice curve that you can fit. And you can plot it out, and it looks nice, and it's interpretable. You can this is what is interesting. Do you think that sense of comfort, or like that sense of like, that, like, it's hard. It's easier for us to look at something like that as a human being and look at it in 2D. At most in 3D we can manage something, but then as long as as soon as it goes above that, it's kind of hard for us to like to feel instinctually or intuitively comfortable with these things. Do you think that's like a useful bias, or do you think that like that might be a bit of like because I feel like I prefer these because I can look at them and I have the sense of, I get it.
Yeah, my take on it is quite simple. I mean, this will depend on the problem, obviously, and I think my take on this is rather simple. If you usually, but it's not always the case, by the way, but usually do your predictions with different models, different complexity of models. If a simple model is as good as anything else, then go for the simple model. So go for the simplest model that still predicts well within a fair margin of the best.
Yeah.
I think that would be good. So would there be strong nonlinearities? Would there be strong interactions? They should be pointed out there.
Yeah.
So you can think there might be a sample size thing to that as well. So if sample size is super small, it will usually go for very simple models. If you have larger sample size, you will be able to start using more complex ones.
So you can think of. Can you think of each model you want to try like as a hypothesis, right?
Yeah.
And then let's say you have a fairly complicated model that fits the data really well.
Yeah.
But then it tells you there's a whole bunch of interactions. Like for example, let's say,
Yeah.
and you fit another model which is simpler, and it does almost as well. But it says that each feature behaves non-linearly.
Yeah.
These two things would lead you to conclude two different things about the problem, right?
Yeah.
And the data set.
Well, we all know nowadays anyway that we should be very, very careful interpreting the model like that. So interpreting the coefficients, interpreting the exact patterns.
Yeah.
There's been lots of papers also that warn you about don't start to interpret predictive models too much in a causal sense anyway. I don't have the complete answer to that. I think it's good to do this. So if you have multiple models and they all predict almost equally well and they give you different explanations, you have to start thinking, okay, what is actually the value of each of these explanations? Because, but hopefully in some cases they will, by and large, find similar patterns. That will also happen, I guess. And after all, I would say that these explanations are still hypotheses rather than that you can kind of confirm them. So once you have, let's say you have a bunch of models, you have 5 models, they're all kind of predicting equally well. Hopefully, they will point somewhat to the same direction in terms of how a feature relates to the outcome. Not exactly, but that will allow you to generate a hypothesis on this, and then maybe you can test that further on in more parametric models. But yeah, this is still very tough.
Make like a story out of it. So imagine a child wakes up and finds Christmas tree gifts under Christmas tree.
Yeah, very suitable for this period.
Yeah, and he's like, okay, how did these presents get here?
Yeah,
and then as his dad, you could be like, okay, can you give me 5 possible explanations as to how this presents appeared here?
Yeah.
And the kid gives you 5 lots of different explanations.
Yeah.
Like Santa Claus came down the chimney.
Yeah.
Like the god put it there.
Yeah.
Like the dog at night was put it under a spell, and the dog went out and collected the gifts.
Or he's very suspicious and blames his parents.
Or he says, it's probably you. Probably you put it here.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Now, in some sense, all of those explanations, like, try to predict the outcome. The presence appeared there.
Yeah.
And let's assume they all predict it very well, right? But one of them is extremely simple, which is like you went to the store, you bought them, you put them here, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of like reasonable makes sense. Like, I'll go with the simplest possible explanation because I don't have to assume all these other super complicated things to happen.
Yeah.
For it to be the case, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what is it like? You shouldn't multiply probabilities unnecessarily. It's like every time you add a new condition, it's like becomes.
It's a bit like Occam's razor,
right?
When there are multiple explanations, you should go for the simplest one. At least that's my interpretation of Occam's razor.
Right.
Which I must be honest, that's not always the case. I've done some simulations. I told you about this. I think I've done some simulations for my own curiosity, in which I spiked in some nonlinear effects and then limited sample size, and then I tuned the simulation such that when I fitted a linear model to it and this was a tree model, but a more complex model to it, that I tuned it such that the predictive performance, so on test samples, was exactly the same. And then my thought was, okay, so Occam's razor would then tell you, okay, go for the linear regression model.
Yeah.
But when I started interpreting the nonlinear model, I could actually retrieve the nonlinear effect, in this case a quadratic effect.
Yeah.
So it did actually tell me something extra, did actually convey an extra message that I could not get from the linear model, which is, so sometimes there is something to learn. Yeah. Even though from a predictive perspective you wouldn't guess. So that is also something that's still a bit on my mind, is how to go about that.
Yeah.
So are there situations where the two models are a whole set of models is equally good, and yet you can learn something from the more complex models.
Yeah.
In terms of patterns or setup.
Yeah, like general relativity versus Newtonian mechanics, right?
Yeah.
One is way weirder, way more complicated,
and
it's like tells you some ridiculous things that turn out to be true somehow.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one is like also works
I think it's also about, most likely what you find is not exactly true, but it gives you a pattern that is quite true. So what I'm saying is, if you have a very complex machine learning, and you show, for example, Shapley value, you start interpreting the effect of a feature on the outcome, and you see, you see something that looks like a parabola, but it will not be exactly a parabola, right? So, say that the true effect is quadratic indeed. What you will see is maybe not an exact parabola, but is something that kind of not too far off.
Yeah.
So the pattern tells you something that it looks a bit quadratic, but might still be off to some extent. It might not convey the quadratic relationship exactly. So, and that's where, of course, that's where the balance is, right?
Okay, so shall we talk about my project?
Let's do though.
Let's do it. Okay, so I actually have the thing here. This is the actual posting that I applied to. Okay, maybe we can just walk through it by little and take it apart and then think about why things is important, why is a problem, blah blah.
Yeah.
Mostly for my friends who keep asking me, so I'm just going to be like, go to this.
Yeah.
But okay, so what does it say? Prediction models are a cornerstone of clinical care as they enable early diagnosis of disease or personalized treatment. Do we have a good example for that? Something that comes to your mind, or when you say they enable early diagnosis of disease or personalized treatment, is there something that people might have heard, that is used all the time, but that people might not be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, okay. To start first, personalized treatment is to some extent a slightly different problem.
Okay.
Prediction models are a component in that. But there, the trick is, of course, that you need prediction models under two different conditions. Would you be not treated at all, or treated with a certain drug, and you want to know the effect. So you really want to know the causal effect of that. So that's, for sure, prediction models are an important component of that evaluation. And then you could think about, there are the example that comes up in my mind is immune therapy for cancer, which is certainly personalized because it only works if you have a particular type of mutation, or it only works if you have and I think people have very strong hypotheses there, which is very good, because otherwise you don't know what to look for. Yet there are still, you can imagine that a certain immune therapy has been kind of developed for a certain type of cancer, where a certain type of mutation is very prevalent. And what they start to see now is that it may also work for other cancers with slightly different mutations or slightly different. So, and that's where the statistical game becomes more important, because then you really would like to predict for whom it will work and who not. And of course, things become more complex in terms of it's not just about one mutation, but about 2 or 3 or 4, etc. It may also depend on other characteristics of the patient. So that is certainly relevant. I must also be honest, is that, and there's lots of literature on that, and that 99% of the models that we develop don't make it to clinical care.
Yeah, of course.
Unfortunately, sometimes that is due to the fact that they don't adapt it very easily, and they still. Or sometimes it's simply not well implemented, or something like that. But that's still a very long trajectory.
I also like medicine is notoriously notoriously risk averse, obviously.
Yeah.
So adopting new things it's a huge and long drawn out process. So I can imagine maybe a statistical or machine learning technique that was invented 10 years ago, maybe now people are like, okay, maybe it's useful, maybe we can use it now. But yeah.
I think for diagnostic problems, it is really potential. It really has because there it's what you say, it's really about early, and you can really indeed hope that if you have the right data, so it's of course also about the data. If you have the right data and the right model, you can possibly pick up things that a pathologist or someone or an oncologist or whoever treats the patient would never pick up so easily.
What do you think about?
So I think there, in particular in imaging, I'm not so, as you know, I'm not so much into imaging. I'm more into genetics data. But in particular in imaging, there have been examples of that in some cases a good model there can pick up things that you wouldn't, that a radiologist or whoever treats the patient will.
Yeah, just move this mic a little bit closer to you. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, just in case. Okay, so I was going to ask, but what about in official hospital settings, it's more difficult, right? But there's more and more every day, sort of off-label consumer grade devices are being put in the market all the time everywhere, and people are coming up with all kinds of algorithms to measure whatever it is that they want: sleep, exercise, diet, heart rate, all these things. And I think there's a lot of interest in the commercial, in sort of the it's like this weird gray area where it's you can't say officially that this is a medical device, because that requires you have to jump through a whole bunch of things. But you can just put out a thing there that says, "Hey, we measure some signal of your heart rate," and then
definitely
gives you some measure about what's going on here.
Yeah.
I think at least at that level, there's still something that it's way more accessible, and people actually use it a lot.
Yeah.
For example, I read this Whoop band thing, but it's quite interesting.
Yeah. The thing there is that I think the whole tradition is not so evidence-based. It's more marketing than I feel then.
Yeah.
So partly becomes a measure, partly becomes a matter of belief.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's fine. Okay. What does this thing say? So okay. Now, machine learning methods hold the promise to improve on classical models. Again, we talk about this a little bit, like this machine learning versus classical models distinction. But what did you mean here specifically? Do you have anything in mind in terms of classical models? When you mean improve
standard logistic regression and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, so
linear.
I don't okay. So I have this weird. I don't know if there's a weird distinction, but I don't understand this distinction, because for me it's everything is machine induction, and you put everything in there, and then everything fits in the box.
Yeah, but there's a linear latent, at least a linear latent state, that there's some kind of level of linearity that we use.
Okay.
Which is the simplest thing one can do.
Okay.
Although I do think classical models are not only regression models, but also kaart, so the simple trees.
Yeah.
These are actually used in medical settings also.
Yeah.
So because, of course, decision trees are easy to read off.
Yeah.
So I think they are also classical models.
Okay.
Random forest probably isn't anymore because it's a whole ensemble. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about, and then moreover, it says, moreover, ML prediction models need to be complemented with interpretability tools and allow uncertainty quantification. There's a lot here in this.
Yeah.
So like, interpretability tools. Now, just like a little while ago, we talked about like we should be very cautious about interpreting anything that this model says as like causal, right?
Yeah.
Or look, for this feature we find that for this range the weight is like it's negative, and then for this range it goes up quickly, and etc. So if it's difficult to interpret this as saying for this specific for this feature, for this value, if you're in this range, then you it adds this much to your risk of, I don't know, heart disease. Why do we do interpretability? If it's like
because we're scientists.
Yes, because you want information about things, right? Yeah. So,
but you have to, because actually the two can to some extent come together. We're also working on that, as you know. So basically, not only provide the interpretation tool like Shapley values, but also give their uncertainties. So that gives you an idea of how real it really is. I think, this is at the heart of science, that you want to understand what's going on, but we'll also realize that it's just an hypothesis at that time, and then of course you can dive into that, and you can even try to follow up on that in new experiments. But I do understand the problem. I mean, it's not. You should be super careful about causal interpretations. By the way, I mean, that's maybe good to mention, because there's lots of papers now. Lots of people write papers about this. You say, you shouldn't do interpretable machine learning or explainable AI because it gives the impression that you can do causal interpretation, etc., etc. Absolutely right that you should be super careful with this. But that's the same with regression coefficients. Regression coefficients have this, so it's the simplest model we know. People have been using them for years and years and years, and you also, there's this, to some extent, there's the same problem that there might be collinearity, there might be, it has to do with the scale, there are all kinds of reasons why there might be selection effects. So also simple regression coefficients can usually not be interpreted so easily, at least not in causal sense. So
would you say,
in some sense, what I'm saying is, if you feel that regression coefficients are useful in some settings, and I think many people agree on this, then the interpretation tools, if they measure what you want to measure, should also be useful. In my opinion, for example, Shapley values are just you could say they are the machine learners' regression coefficients.
Right.
And can also be interpreted and used with that with the same care that you need to interpret regression coefficients.
So at the very least, you can say, if you build a model, right, and you get a shape of this shape of the way the features influence the model outputs.
Yeah.
Like, at the very least, you can say, well, I think, can you say this is what the model, this is how the model has converged to decide on the output using this structure.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily say anything about, like, you can't go from that to make generalizations about the whole data, the whole population of data you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
But for at least this model, based on this data, if you use it in this way, this is how it's deciding to make a decision. Is that?
Yeah, but yes, and you should never forget the circumstance. You should never forget the setting. So the model, yes, which has some preferences. And I think that is also, previously we talked about differences in machine learning statistics. And that's also what we I mean, we should never forget the study design.
Yeah.
Was there some kind of randomization
Yeah.
going on before? Or has there been oversampling of men with respect to women? All these kind of things. So don't forget about the study design, but because partly your model would kind of just trace that back. And so if that is not representative of the population that you're actually interested in, because then you have to start thinking about that. So it always has to be set in that context. And the more carefully you thought about the study design, or the more generalizable your result will be to the actual population behind it. So that's also these kind of effects that you see. Right. But
Do you think? Like, I feel like there's maybe a little less sort of emphasis on really thinking about where the data came from and how it was collected and what the data actually is.
Yeah.
Because I think, let's say, if your main experience with learning, machine learning, or statistics is with sort of, like, I think I would say it's very few people that actually start from the point of the data collection itself.
Mm-hmm.
Most people start off with a data set, or they start off with a data set from online or from patients or from a separate study or something like this.
Yeah.
But if you actually are involved in data collection itself, you get a bit more of an intuition onto how impactful the decisions you make at the collection stage are to what your model actually ends up learning. Yeah. It's very it's super very illuminating. I think it's something. It's a useful exercise. Like for my bachelor's thesis, for my internship, before the bachelor's thesis, I wrote the code to get the data to do my thesis.
Yeah.
So it basically extracted the data from raw, it actually built the data itself. So in that process, I had to make so many decisions. And so many simplifying assumptions at the stage of collecting the data that, like, after I finished the whole project, my level of the confidence I had to say, like, this is definitely the thing. I was like, there's no way. There's no way. No. The point. At any point down the chain of decisions that I made, I could have made an assumption that was completely wrong about the data.
Yeah.
That, like, this is interesting. This is what you have. And then at that point, I understood, like, viscerally the idea that, like, one paper on one thing means absolutely nothing. You know,
that's true, probably.
Like you have to like it's like a ton of evidence over a ton of years, different labs, different methods.
No, but that relates back to what we discussed. So suppose you have interpretability tools and they show some kind of exponential or quadratic behavior, and I see that for my data set, and if now 7 other researchers with a different data set, they see the same thing, then we might start believing it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how it goes in science.
Yeah.
But that's so.
So the issue is, I think, is like people look at a model, they do some interpretability measure, and they see overall in general. For example, let's say the amount of red meat you eat in this population. This model shows that there's like an exponential relationship between the amount of the grams of red meat per day feature and the heart attack prediction. Yeah. You're like, okay, we're going to work backwards from this, slam the amount of red meat you eat all the way to the ground, and then this should solve the problem. I think this is where the problems usually start, right? It's like, okay, I don't know if you can actually go back and do that because, who was the people? Where did they come from? What did they use? Like, what is the model you use? Like, what assumptions are you pumping into the model to make the model work? Because from what I found is, like, reading machine learning papers, it's like duct-taped math. You just, like, take a piece of math, duct tape it here, take another piece of math, you duct tape it here, duct tape it here, and then you pump it through another piece of math, and you're like, yes, the model works, everything's fine, right? But as long as you don't shake anything, everything's fine. Everything works, and everything's good. But it's super interesting. So, like, okay, all right. So and then of course, like, uncertainty comes with quantification, like. We want to quantify the uncertainty on the output of the model. When it says, so what does that mean? That means, like, we have a set of data that we have. and then let's say hypothetically in the simplest case, we do train, test, split. We train on the data, and then we predict on the test set. So when you say you want to quantify the uncertainty, you're saying for like
For the prediction.
For a given input feature set, what is the variation that you could expect in the output? That's basically it, right?
Yeah. So how certain am I about when a new patient comes in? We predict that a patient has still 5 years to live.
Yeah.
Then what is the range there?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it
5 years plus or minus 20?
Are we super certain about that?
Yeah.
Or are we actually super uncertain that could it be 1, but it could also be 20 years?
Yeah.
And that's important in many settings, of course. That I have to admit that communication of uncertainty is really hard, particularly to patients, etc. In general, the general public can be quite hard, although there have been quite a lot of efforts on that. But at least, for example, the doctors or something that also people who make decisions on the treatments or have at least have an impact on that, they should know about it, and they should.
So predicting you have 5 years to live plus or minus 6 months is very different for 5 years plus or minus 20 years. Like
yes, definitely.
That's a very different.
Yeah, that's very different. And it is known that if you just, and that's what I think it's important to say, if you just give a point prediction, that people kind of see it as certain.
Right.
This is kind of intrinsic in imagine you're a patient, very nervous, serious disease. You're sitting in the doctor's room, and the doctor says something. Obviously the doctor knows much more about the disease than you, and the doctor says, "Well, you should count on 5 years, or you count on." Then you tend to believe it.
Yeah,
and that's the very natural reaction. But it's therefore also the responsibility of the doctor not of the doctor alone, and also of us to give a good grayscale to that when the grayscale is relevant. And
right. So and there's a range of techniques to give us this confidence bound on the output. To say
the output.
So Bayesian techniques do this by default, right?
Do this by default, but it can also be done with classical techniques.
Okay.
I just mentioned conformal prediction is a really promising development there that can basically provide these uncertainties for any type of machine learner, although there's still lots of things to do there. But and you might also want to know uncertainty about the importance of certain features. So and that's a different kind of uncertainty quantification. So you gave the red meat example. So can we prove actually that indeed red meat has a significant impact on the outcome in the context of the model?
Yeah.
That is also a way, that means proof means going beyond randomness, and that's uncertainty quantification. That's another very important application where you can say these features or these characteristics are important and these are not, because that also will give you hints on what to look for, what to kind of monitor, for example, or what to
Right. Yeah. Like so just to make sure I got
what to intervene on or something.
So when you train a model, if you give it the exact same, if the input is the same, if you give it over and over again, you get the exact same output.
Yeah.
Right? Like nothing changes. So when you quantify what you could expect, the range for a given input, where is that range coming from? So what are you varying?
The outcome.
Yeah. What are you varying about the input to get that?
I'm not varying the input. I think that is the real difference in this machine learning. I'm acknowledging that the outcome is not a deterministic function of the input. The outcome is a function of the input, but there is also an intrinsic random component that we cannot explain fully from the input. So even if you and I have the same input, we will not live as equally long, for example. And that is kind of accounted for in
I see. Okay. So you're saying
usually what you and the same with binary even. So you kind of acknowledge what part of the outcome cannot be explained by the input.
So taken it for granted that there is a part that you cannot explain.
Yeah.
So
there's two levels of that. That is the biggest component. The other component is the uncertainty of the model itself. So you and I agree that if I give you one data set and I train a model and I give you a second data set, which is from the same population, but it's a different data, it will not give me the same model.
Yeah.
So the model itself is also somewhat uncertain. That's a very complex uncertainty, actually, which you particularly have to deal with when you have limited sample size. So if you have large sample sizes, you can hope that you kind of are there. The model has converged, as we say it.
Yeah.
But often that's not the case. So the model itself is also not a certain thing. That kind of uncertainty you might want to incorporate as well, but that's much more difficult. So you can either quantify uncertainty conditional on the model. So you take the model as fixed, as a deterministic construct. Then there's still some uncertainty left because the outcome is not fully determined by the model.
The outcome in the general population or
survival,
the data?
yeah, no, your outcome, right? It's your survival or your binary. You are not fully. There's some uncertainty left over, right?
So wait, I maybe mix something. So if I have the two exact same data points,
Yeah.
right, and the outcome is prediction of like, will you have a heart attack or not?
Yeah.
In reality, if two people have the exact same values for the features we measured, they are one might get a heart attack, one might not get a heart attack.
Yeah.
Accounting for a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah.
Is that what we're accounting for when you say we're quantifying the uncertainty and the output, or like this sort of meta uncertainty that we assume is going to happen? Or is it like something about the data set itself?
Those are the two components I was trying to explain.
Okay.
There's an uncertainty there's an intrinsic uncertainty in the prediction.
Yes.
That partly comes from the fact that that the things are not deterministic.
Right.
And that basically and that's not potentially that different from the 0.3, 0.7 example that you gave.
Yeah.
That's a kind of uncertainty quantification. You're not sure about the label, but you get it. And there's an uncertainty of the model itself, which is the much more difficult part. Basically acknowledging that if you would have gotten other data, you would have gotten another prediction for the same person. And there is no truth out there in terms of the data. So it's kind of logical that you should, to some extent, also propagate that uncertainty.
Right.
Because why should my prediction depend so much on the training data, on the particular example I take there? If I would have taken another example, if it would have given me a very different prediction, then that's worrisome, right?
Right.
Because hopefully, of course, model has kind of converged. You have used a large data setting, and you kind of are in business, meaning that all these trained models would possibly give you very similar predictions. So then that's not so much of a problem anymore. Then the only uncertainty left is the intrinsic uncertainty due to the fact that the model is that the real life is not deterministic.
Oh yeah, real life is not deterministic.
No. Has been a big discussion already in the 18th and 19th century, I think.
Yes. Okay,
but let's not go there.
Okay, no, I think I'm going to spend some time on the idea of uncertainty itself. But here, let's wrap it up in a couple of minutes.
Yes.
I think an hour is good. Okay, so I guess these are the kind of things I'm just working on, and then of course, like working with situations where the number of samples we have, number of examples in a data set we have is much more than the number of features that we have.
Yeah.
And this brings together a whole different set of problems that you have to sort of try to address, which in a lot of cases sometimes exclude using really complicated deep neural networks for this. But I think
I would say that's a very interesting topic that we can maybe cover at some other time, because it's a whole super interesting field that I feel has not gotten enough attention in terms of the fact that we deal with like what I call multi-complexity data. It's a bit different than multimodal data, but you can also imagine it's not just multi-complexity in terms of that you have a high-dimensional component and a low-dimensional one, but it might also be that the low-dimensional one, for example, which we see in medical settings, already there has been much more proof that these are actually relevant features.
Right.
So there is kind of, if you think a little bit Bayesian, it's like your priors are better on those than on the extra features that are used with, that are measured with fancy techniques, or there could be cost aspects to it. It's like the fancy technique measures a high-dimensional genomics component, but is quite expensive. So actually, if you wouldn't need it, you would prefer a model without it.
Yeah.
And so there are all these kind of nuances in terms of what model is preferable or not, that are not only performance-based, but also how can you actually implement it in practice.
I think so the last week I went down a rabbit hole about the standard error and like quantifying uncertainty and this thing, and I'm really want to go deeper in this idea of uncertainty itself, like really like sort of this like you said, it's difficult to quantify, it's difficult to translate to people usually, so I want to understand it more deeply, I think. But I think that's good. We'll definitely do this again, but thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Nice. Good.